Here we are with episode 3 of Why Is Your Podcast on a Dead Girl's Phone. My name is Niles. Today I sit down and talk with Daniel Robinson, who is a writer for the show. Starting in season 3, he wrote 5 episodes throughout the series, but has been with the show ever since season 1. So it was amazing to sit down and talk with him and get tips for writing, behind the scenes secrets, the writing process for the show and all that stuff. So I hope you guys enjoy. This was an amazing conversation, and I really loved talking with him. So thank you, Daniel, again for coming on. And yeah, we talk everything from How to Get Away with Murder, of course, to him working on Grey's and Scandal, private practice from his first book, which I will link in the description. I just finished it last night, and it is so good. I really hope you guys will go and check it out. And yeah, this was an amazing episode, and I hope you guys enjoy. And yeah, here we go. The first question I kind of wanted to ask you was, when did you first know that you wanted to be a writer?
Uh, I would say I made the choice at film school. Uh, I was lucky enough to have a great high school. It was called electronic media, TV production teacher and class at my school, and so I got really into TV production. It was more from like a broadcast standpoint, though. We had a small studio, a stage with 3 cameras, and we do like live switching in the room, sort of like broadcast journalism style. And this was right on the cusp of digital and nonlinear editing coming in. So we were recording everything on tape and doing linear editing. And like right in my senior year, we got our first nonlinear editing system at the time, which I think was called the Casablanca. Anyway, this was probably super boring to anyone listening to the podcast, but I was really into that sort of element of television production, right? I wasn't so focused on the writing, but okay, do we need to start over?
No, I just forgot to pull it over. Oh
Okay, oh, I can hear you much better now.
okay, good. I forgot it was over there. My
So,
bad.
I did that. I ended up going to NYU for film school, and they have you do kind of everything there. You know, you have to edit, direct, write, produce, be camera, grip, produce, like location, whatever it is. You wear all the hats, and we all have to make a student film. And I made my student film there, and it was so terrible. It was so bad. And like I broke out in hives when we had to
Oop.
screen it for everybody that I said, I'm never doing this again until I have a great script, until I know that what I'm writing, what I'm going to film is worth it. And also just from a monetary standpoint, it was always about like calling in favors and trying to get a location, some restaurant or someone will let you film for free or for cheap, and then getting the actors and feeding everybody. There's a lot of cost in producing things. And again, this was right before like everybody had quality cameras on their phones. So there's still some level of investment you had to make in the equipment if you wanted to tell stories visually. And I just said, writing is cheap, and it's where the story starts. My high school teacher, Mr. Chuvin, who's still teaching in Georgia, he had a saying, you can't make chicken soup out of chicken poop. And it's basically like, if your script is bad, you're not going to fix it in editing. You're not going to fix it on set. You need a good story to start with. And so I just, from that point on in film school, I said, I'm going to focus on screenwriting.
And you went to college in Georgia, or did you go to somewhere else?
Yeah, I went to the University of Georgia for 2 years and then transferred to NYU and graduated from there in New York.
Yeah, this podcast equipment wasn't cheap, so I understand the whole production stuff with that. And then you touched on like agent's assistant, writer's assistant, and just like going through the whole list before you finally became, or was in the writer's room. So what was the challenges for each of those?
The number one is patience, right? I'm
Right.
sure everybody who's ever wanted to work in any facet of this industry, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera, I remember coming out of film school thinking I had an internship in LA where I was reading scripts and I was seeing scripts that were coming out of film school students that were getting sold. And I was like, this is going to be me. My career is just going to launch. Like, I'm ready. Let's go. As soon as I get off the 405, I'm sure there's going to be a overall deal at Universal waiting for me. And that is not the Hollywood that I actually encountered. And so you have to be patient, and you have to be humble, and you have to keep working at your skill set constantly, while you're working those day jobs, building your professional network. Because the one thing that really does help, you know, um, shortcut your career is nepotism. And unfortunately, I did not have any of that working in my favor when I got out there. So I had to build my own network of people who could potentially give me a job as a writer through my day job as an assistant. And then on nights and on weekends and whenever I had time, I had to be constantly writing my material and improving at my craft, because you're never going to compete with the people who are already at a professional level, if you're not working even harder than they are, because they're already there. And once you get to that personal level, you have a lot of resources at your disposal. And when you're on your own, you don't, as I'm sure you can relate to with this podcast, right? You have to wear a lot of hats, do it all your own.
I just had these hats made. Pretty proud of the hats, but yeah. Oh
Yeah, I
man.
meant figurative hats, but it's a nice literal hat.
Nice little embroidered logo.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'll send you one if you want. I have a whole bunch. Oh man. And then kind of touching on working through, or not like having it the Hollywood be like what you expected. I kind of wanted to bring up your first
Uh,
book. It was so good. Finished it last night and I
oh,
loved every single page of it. Like from Russ's um addiction with food to how everyone acts in Hollywood once they get the little sort of fame and stuff going on. When did you first start writing this?
first off, I want to give you a big compliment, because I watched or listened to the first two episodes of the podcast, and I
Hey.
listened to a ton of podcasts. Especially, I got into them on murder when I was the researcher, because there's so many great legal podcasts out there, crime podcasts, to just get story ideas.
Oh yeah.
And I cannot say that I've ever listened to a podcast with a host who does their research to the level that you are doing your research.
No.
I'm serious. I'm very, very impressed with your level of dedication. I learned things. I worked with Conrad for 6 years. I learned things about him I never knew, that you knew, and you
Hey.
asked questions about. And so I'm very, very impressed with that level of research. I'm impressed you found the book. I can't believe you read the whole thing. I'm
Yeah.
flattered by that.
Thank you for saying that.
I think you're doing a great job. Um, to answer your question specifically, it's hard to remember now. I started it right before Murder started. Do you know who Betsy Beers is? I'm sure you've heard that name, or you've seen her name in the
Oh
credits.
yeah, I've seen
So
it.
that's who I worked for before I worked on the show. I was her assistant for 4 years, and she's like Shonda Rhimes' producing partner. She has oversight over all the existing shows, but she also does development. So Pete was a writer. He'd been on Grace. He'd been on Scandal. We had developed with him the year previously for a show that didn't ultimately get picked up. They'd written a script. They didn't shoot the pilot though. And then the second year they developed with him again, and we did Murder. And that's when I was able to go onto that show, because Betsy knew I wanted to be a writer. I should be in a writer's room. So that's why I got to go into that room as an assistant. And I know I was working on the book when I was Betsy's assistant. And it was probably, it was a very long process, because I've never written a book before. And so it probably took, a year or so for the first draft. Then I worked intensively with an editor. That was like another year. And then we shopped it around to try to get it published. Nobody wanted to publish it. So then I decided to self-publish. So like start to finish, from when I started writing it to when it was published, was probably like 5 years.
Damn. Yeah, I finished it last night. I marked some post-it notes with my favorite parts I
Oh,
wanted to touch on real quick.
sure.
But from this one's at the start of season 2, but I really love the line where where's it at?
You
Oh
mean
my god.
chapter two?
Yeah, chapter 2. My bad. Yeah. The post-it didn't
Keep
help.
you in mind.
Oh, the beautiful people here look through me, waiting for me to get thin before they can begin to treat me like a real person. In my town, the bigger you are, the easier you are to ignore. Oh my god, that yeah. I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. Like, damn, that hit me right off the bat. Yeah,
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah. Like, I've been since like last June. I've been like on a big like workout exercise thing, and like 4 pant sizes I've gone down, and like 60 pounds so far. So yeah.
That's how do you feel? You feel good?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's good.
it's the hardest thing I've ever done, but yeah. So this book really helped like put it into perspective that more people go through it and in like big city like Hollywood and stuff too. So
Yeah, so many people. I mean, it's not been a bestseller or anything, but a lot of people have read it, and it's every. I can't say every person, right? But the preponderance of people have wrestled with these issues in one way or another, and a lot of times it's people you would have never expected, and that was something that's been surprising for me because it was a personal thing for me. I didn't have a food addiction like Russell did, but I was much bigger when I was younger, and I had to work to get to the physical shape that I wanted to be in to live the sort of life I wanted to live. Because I try not to put it in terms of like looking the way I want to look because that's always a losing battle, right?
yeah.
And like I still have a bit of that dysmorphia where if I catch a picture of myself that I don't know is an old picture of me, right? Just that first second, I'll look at it and think, wow, that guy's in good shape. And then when I realize it's me, then my brain starts to distort it again and be like, oh my God, well, this is wrong. This is wrong. You just
Swipe.
that. So yeah, it's been personal, and a lot of people share that, and I think that's been helpful for me to know. And in Hollywood, it's like on a scale I never would have expected because everything's about image out there.
Right. And I loved all the promotional pictures you did on your Instagram when the book was coming out with like all the food and stuff laying on top of it, and that was really clever and stuff. Oh man. And then the next part, um, when what chapter? When they're at the game and he takes the hot dog and just in front of Jessica and just starts going to town on it, and then the whole wave thing and how their eyes they're just like locked into each other, and I just thought that part was really good too. Oh my god.
Yeah, a lot of people think that Jessica was based on some real girlfriend, and that's not true at all. She actually is just, and this touches on screenwriting as well, just another part of me, right? And the part of my psyche that was always so judgmental and always telling me, like, you're not good enough. You have to look like this. You have to, no one's going to care for you. No one's going to love you. No one's going to respect you if you don't. And it was just me trying to reconcile those two parts of myself, because I don't think you can ever cut away a part of yourself. You have to always like heal them through conversation and bring them together. So that was me trying to do that through a book. And I still have my moments, but to a large extent, writing that book was very therapeutic for me.
Damn. Yeah, I was in the about part at the end. I was like, where is who's Jessica? Like and
She doesn't.
then the next post-it note I wanted to touch on was the chapter 13. There's a kind of silence that is a comfort. It comes in the wilderness as a reminder from nature that we are the cause of our own headaches. Yeah.
I'm glad you can appreciate those. It's funny because each one of those chapters, I said I worked with an editor, right? And I think that it ties into the show as well. Writing is rewriting at this point. That's what I'm convinced of. I don't know any writer that gets it correct the first time out. And every single one of those chapters of that book, I would go back and forth with the editor, sometimes 10, 12 times. And it was different in a TV writer's room. We're all, the 10 of us are working collectively together to pitch ideas, pitch lines, try to solve the problems. With this, she was never pitching me ideas, but she was always just challenging me. She was always saying, go deeper, be more truthful, find something more honest. Is this really, now look at it from this other character's perspective? Is this tracking for them? And so who knows what iteration I got to that line, but I enjoy it as well because I am my favorite writer. And I'll say that on the back. I think everybody should be, in the sense that I want to write the things that I really would enjoy reading, right? If I was the audience, that's what my goal always is. And so who knows how long that took, but it took a long time. Just like every episode, like going back and looking at these episodes in preparation for this discussion, I remembered all of the conversations.
And then, yeah, but I'll put the link in the description on YouTube so everyone can.
Amazon, if anybody wants to get it.
Yes, and Kindle or like the and Audible and all that probably. Yeah.
Right.
Perfect. Yeah, it'll be on my bookshelf. Just play it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And Betsy Beers, you brought up her. She's worked on Grey's and Scandal and all those. Do you have any favorite moments from working on those shows?
I mean, Shondaland has been my entire career, right? Since I'd worked on some other stuff before then, and I'm grateful to every opportunity I've gotten. But like as far as my career as a writer, it's been Shondaland. They're the ones who gave me a chance, and that is only possible because of their sustained success. So many times in TV, I know a lot of people I would consider peers who trying to break in as screenwriters you'll get a job on a show and you're in the writer's room and it's super exciting. And then the show gets canceled after 6 episodes and you're out of a job. And there's no chance for you to move up if the show doesn't have multiple seasons, because that's when people get opportunities for promotion. And so I just lucked into arriving at Shondaland. I was temping for Betsy, but it ended up being a fit and working out. And I didn't really like, at the point I got there, I think Grey's was in season 6. It was, a well-tuned machine at that point. And Private Practice was, I think, in season 4. It was running fine as well. And so most of what I was helping her with was development. And that was a great experience for a young writer to see, 4 years in a row, that cycle of writers coming in, pitching ideas, Betsy sort of working between what it was all ABC at that point. That's who their deal was with, what ABC was looking for, what these other writers were bringing in, where she saw some middle ground, like trying to manage what the writer's passionate about, but contour that to what might be most amenable to what the network's looking for. And, everybody's always sort of chasing success or thinking they have these niches to fill, but like Grey's Anatomy was a dark horse that the network did not believe in, that all of it became a huge hit. Same with Scandal too. Like it was this weird 6 episode miniseries. They weren't really sure about it. And then I think that was one of the first shows that it did all right when it premiered live, but when it went on to Netflix and people could watch it straight through, because ABC was still licensing to Netflix at that point, it became a phenomenon. And from that point, it was just a huge, huge hit and a cultural phenomenon as well. So being there to see all of those steps of the process, right, of how TV goes from like idea to hit, that's been invaluable. And I will say, my one claim to fame is that when Judy Smith came to meet with Shonda, and Betsy had set up the meeting between them because she's told Shonda, you got to meet with this person. I think there's a show here. I was the guy who went and bought the wine and cheese for them, for their first meeting, when they sat in our office for a few hours and talked. And then Shonda went away and, geniusly envisioned Scandal.
That's crazy to hear that they didn't think Scandal was going to be.
If you talk to the network execs now, they'll all claim that they were like the biggest fan and the champion of it. But and I'm not going to say any names, but I was there in the trenches, and I can tell you they weren't 100% sure what they had on their hands.
God damn, Scandal was everywhere, but oh my god.
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious on your end, because as Conrad said, and I wholeheartedly agree, you're clearly our show's #1 fan, undisputed. Title yours until infinity. I don't know if anyone can beat you, but were you always a fan of Shondaland shows? Was it this show in particular?
Oh no, I've watched Grey's since the plane crash, I would say, live, or a little before the plane crash, I think. But then I did catch up with Scandal through Netflix and then watched the final season live. And then I've never gotten around to watching Private Practice yet, but I was in this Shonda roller coaster already.
You have as much passion for any of those shows as you did for How to Get Away with Murder, or was that like took it to another level?
No, just I still love Grey's and I really love Scandal, but yeah, top tier goes to Murder.
I'm curious on your end what it was about this show that just was it from the moment you watched the pilot you were just pulled in from that on, and what was it about that?
Yeah, I watched the pilot. I never watched any of season 1 live because I talked to Kelsey Scott about this too. I worked at the movie theater, and I always worked Thursday nights because that was like when the big movies would come out, like a midnight showing or whatever. So I never got to watch season 1 live, but I would watch it like 2 hours later when I got home. But yeah, right when the pilot when they revealed that the dead body was Sam at the end. I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna be, because I'm so used to like mystery shows like dragging it out like
Uh,
season to season or having all these red herrings and not really. I don't know, but yeah, right when they revealed Sam at the end, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta get some posters on my wall for this. Yeah. Yeah, but then season two, my boss at the movie theater recognized how obsessed I came, so he scheduled me off from season two till the end, so I could watch every live episode and tweet. Yeah.
that's so impressive. And outside of TV, had anything in your life, and you like, I'm curious about, because clearly you have so much passion for this, right? And I think that's great, like this energetic resource that you have. And I'm really commend you on putting this podcast together because you're channeling it into something productive. And from my perspective, it's been really enjoyable because there's just starting to be enough separation. Like it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life professionally working on this show. It was hard, right? Putting the show together was a challenge for the writers from start to finish. Um, and but now there's like a little bit of a separation. It's been a year, and I'm like, oh, you know what though? That was like it's good to go back and reminisce a little bit, and I'm really enjoying the show as a result of that. But I'm curious if you had this energy for anything else, or it was just all of a sudden this show just sparked something inside of you that hadn't been there before.
Mm, I mean, I've had other shows like I would change my Twitter account just to that show, but only just for like I had a Doctor Who face for a while, or Heroes when that was back on on NBC,
Yeah.
or Westworld for a little bit. But yeah, but Murder was like the first like that I knew I had to fall in love with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Damn. Damn. Yeah, that's crazy. But oh, nervous now.
You
Oof.
nervous?
Yeah, all
Why?
the all the biggest fan stuff. I don't know.
Being considered the biggest fan?
Like all your biggest saying I'm the biggest fan and stuff. I get nervous.
I mean, there could be a bigger one, right? And they're just
Right.
not as good at social media as you at reaching out to all of us.
Hey.
But you're the one who reached out the most. I think Pete, you have the tattoo, right?
Yeah, two of them. Yeah.
That was when it was. What season did you get the tattooing? The one that's like kind of this. It's like a silhouette of all the
Of the
cats.
yeah, the start of season three, I got that one.
So that must be. I remember Pete coming into the room and saying, "You guys, someone got a tattoo of all the characters," and from that moment on, you became known to us.
And then you guys killed Wes, and people said I should get a X through Wes's face on my arm. I was like, no.
We did not ever endorse any modifications to anybody's body or body art.
Disclaimer.
Yeah.
And then I remember JC Lee tweeted me and said that you guys watched my reaction video to
Yes.
Wes's under the sheet reveal. So that was kind of like the start too of you guys or showing me that you saw my stuff.
Yeah. I would say we had, a healthy relationship with you because you never know, right? In Hollywood, and you're totally excluded from this. Like, I think you're just a really great person, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to be here because
Thank you.
you've been so kind and so gracious to all of us. Um, but there are some people like working at Shondaland for you, right? They'd have a stalker from time to time, but they'd
Oh,
have someone who was like, you don't want to encourage an interaction with that person.
oh
So we had to have a healthy distance, but over time, you just ingratiated yourself to all of us, and we really like. There were times when I'd be in the room, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, we're never going to get this episode broken. We've tried like 5 different times. It's not working. We're a day away from prep. What are we going to do? Just phone it in, like whatever. Just get it done." And then I would think, you know what? Niles is out there. He cares so much about this.
damn.
Owe it to him. You can figure this out.
Counting down the days till the next. Figure it out.
And also shout out JC Lee, one of the
Hey.
coolest guys I've ever worked with.
Yeah, he was. I was freaking out when he told me that you guys watched that video. Oh man, but and then you started as a writer's assistant in season one, right?
Mm.
For How
Like
did
I could type fast.
oh my god. I like your post on Instagram with um the gloves, I think they are. The
Right.
writer I like
Yeah.
that
The
post, yeah.
carpal tunnel glove. It was
Hanging on the
real though.
wall, yeah.
I knew there was a guy, Miguel Nola, who was assistant. He was one of Shonda's assistants. He had been there about a year before I got to Shondaland. Then he got to be the writer's assistant on Scandal, and he took so many notes that he actually got carpal tunnel syndrome. And so he warned me when I started, because some people, room notes are going to be different. The show I'm on now, Bridgerton, uh,
It
they do it. The assistants do the notes in a more like they'll listen to the conversation and then do like a little summary of what was discussed. But on Murder and on Scandal, it was like being a stenographer. They wanted you got every word down, and you would just put the showrunner in bold so you'd know what's the most important stuff, and then everyone else was regular. And so some day, average was like 25 pages of notes a day, but some days you're coming out with like 40 pages of notes. It was just a lot of typing.
and then do you remember the first time you were in the writer's room? Or what was that like?
Yeah, it was day one. It was the most excited I've ever been professionally, I think. Uh, it was just like a dream come true. I loved from moment one, like this show was kind of magical in that from Pete's initial pitch to the outline to the script, it didn't change that much. Some little things changed, but overall, like just from moment one, you're like, this is great. This is going to be great. Like this, I didn't want to get my hopes up because it'd been there 4 years already, but I was like, this should go. This should be a show. They're going to pick this up, right? And then when you saw the pilot, and I wasn't there, there's three other people who were attached to this show as long as I was. Betsy and Pete, because they developed it, and then Tess Leibowitz, who was Pete's assistant on the pilot. Technically, I was there before her because I was there for the pitch before he got his own assistant. But she's been more involved than anybody. She's dedicated herself more to the show, I think, than anybody. And so from moment one, I was like, this is gonna work. And then when I didn't get to go to the production because they actually shot the pilot in Philly. But then when I saw it, I was like, this is amazing. This is great. Like, this is going to go. This is going to be that thing. And then when it was, and I was in the room, and, there was there's like introductions and everything, and that's cool. And meeting everybody, and all the writers were great, and they were cool. And it was very much a place an environment where they were welcoming and encouraging of everybody. It was about the idea, not about the seniority. And like, they knew everybody on the support staff also wanted to be a writer, so they were supportive of all of us. And that first like jam session, once the pleasantries were done and everybody just started working and pitching and talking, and I was writing it down, it was like intoxicating for me to be in that style of environment. I was like, wow, like if you were a musician and you're just around great jazz musicians all of a sudden jamming out, you're like, holy shit, like I'm gonna get to play jazz with these people. Like it was really intoxicating.
The euphoria, yeah. God dang. And then say like coming back for the next season, how much is like planned to like how would that look coming back from hiatus, and how much of everything is planned out from
Between seasons, like between season one, once season one ended, you're saying how much of two was already planned?
or just like in general, like 2 to 3, 3 to 4, like coming back, like how much stuff would be planned for
Between seasons, I don't think I mean, Pete might have some stuff in his head, but there's WGA regulations about that. You can't have your writers breaking story for the next season because they're only paid for this one. So we might have a general idea of like, if we end with this big twist,
yeah,
cliffhanger season one, here's a place you could start season two, or this is what it could be about. But no, we didn't ever have too much, and we would come in and Pete would have his ideas, but he'd wait because the showrunner has so much influence over the room. And I think this started maybe season 3 or 4, where he would say, okay, I've got my ideas, but you guys, each one of you is going to get like the morning or the afternoon. I want you guys to pitch what you think this season could be, so I can hear all of it untainted, unfettered, because maybe I'm not thinking of everything. And then we'll take all the best ideas and arc out the season. So we would all have to do that. And of course, that was super nerve wracking. And you'd spend like weeks preparing to basically present to the class. But it's also fun because you got to pitch like I try to pitch some good stuff, and then I try to one or two like crazy things that maybe I would like, but seem like I'm left field for the show. And then once all that was done, he would say, "Okay, here's the things I liked," and then we'd take out a big board for the whole season and say like, okay, here's our big and always start with Annalise. Here's where Annalise starts, where she could end up. So in episode 2, she could do this. 3, she could, and then we'd go each character by character. We'd have a big board with like our tent poles, our goal posts for the season, and those would change as we went along and we found things that were working and wasn't. But we'd have a somewhat of a guide.
And did you what do you remember any of those crazy pitches that are things that you thought you wanted to happen? Do you
Oh,
remember?
okay. Yeah, what was one I pitched? Here's one I pitched that didn't make it in at all. And there's no Easter eggs. This literally is not in the show at all, right? I just pitched it, but never made it in. I thought that this must have been either 5 or 6 I pitched this for, because it was later, that I think it was after Michaela and Asher broke up. Asher was going to get a new girlfriend, and she was just going to be kind of like annoying to the K5. But then we were going to have murders and stuff happening, and what we were going to realize was that she was actually a serial killer.
Oh.
And because so many murders had been happening around Middleton, she basically knew that there was another killer operating there. So she had gone there and like tricked Asher kind of, or seduced him, because she was trying to find who this other killer was. So just bringing in this other killer character, right? Who was like
That's
basically,
Scream.
yeah, that never.
That's some Scream 2 type of 2 killer stuff. And then it kind of reminded me of when Wes has to go last and come up with something. That kind of reminded me of everyone pitching their ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it would art imitates life in many ways, and so there are things in the show that felt true to our experience in breaking the story.
Damn, Asher girlfriend. Did you have a favorite character to write for in your episodes?
I mean, Annalise, of course.
Period.
I can't, I could not understate the significance of getting to work with Viola Davis on this show, like of getting to work with her at all as a writer in my life. Like it was the first time I was on set, right, covering my episode. And Viola Davis starts questioning the scene. What scene was it? I can't even remember. But it's like the most intimidated I've ever felt in my life, right?
Oh.
Because how am I going to tell her my interpretation of this scene is the more accurate one, right? And how am I going to get her to do this thing that she's feeling like isn't good enough, isn't authentic enough? And so you tell her your side, and she's intense, but she's very fair, and that's just her process. And get it down. She finds a way to make the scene work, and then she's amazing on camera. And just her level of talent and ability, and her professionalism, her desire to not just phone it in for any moment, right? Even if it was like a small, just her whatever it was, her desire to make every moment authentic, to make every moment as good as it could be, made you really be prepared, really on your A game, really understand the story, and elevated all of us as writers as well. And so, right, and this is no shade to any of the other casts, because I genuinely am grateful to all of them. But it's like working with Viola and writing for Annalise was, always the best.
God, oh, man, that'd be or not. I don't know. I feel like in all her interviews and from my other 2 interviews, like she's always so down to earth and doesn't get caught up in the spot.
No, none of it is artifice. None of it is like I'm a big star, like cater to me. It's about the work. It's about like, these are the words you're trying to get me to read. I don't believe them. I don't think my character would believe them, or she wouldn't say these. And then you try to tell her, well, maybe you can see it from this way, and she would say, no, but you're missing that. This is more important to my character, right? And you would have to say, okay, that's fair. Well, maybe could we change this? And then it feels like, okay, that's a little better. Why don't you try that? Let me see. It was never anything about ego. It was always about the work. And so it's intimidating because you don't want to disappoint her, right? But it makes you elevate your game.
and be a better writer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn. And then your first was that the first you said the first episode? Yeah. Your first episode was 312. Go cry somewhere else. Do you remember your reaction when you first got that, or how do you guys even like pick which writer's gonna write for the season? Like, how does that all work out?
Pete would make the schedule with, there'd usually be like a number two on the show who's an executive or co-EP. So another more experienced writer who'd worked, for 8, 10 plus years. And that person changed from season to season. We had Michael Foley. He would do it with Joe Fazio. Sometimes he would do it with Mike Russo. And they would just sit down at the early in the season. Usually we'd know Pete was going to write the first one and the last one. And then like a more experienced writer would get like two or three because they'd be ready to go without needing that ramp up. And then they'd just figure out based on like, okay, let's have a more experienced writer do one, then like a newer writer do one. And this episode we think based on our arc is going to be more to this writer's strength, so they should do 7 and this writer can do 6. Or like directors as well. Sometimes it would be based on these are the directors we have lined up and we want to pair this writer who's newer with a more experienced director, or this is a newer director. I mean, this is newer director, so we more experienced writers. So there's a lot of things. They're just trying to like make the most sense of who to put where. And so that's where it was called a freelance episode, my first episode. The way a lot of times it happens is the Writers Guild has this policy on a show that has a certain number of episodes a year. If they don't do a freelance episode, meaning give one episode to someone who's not paid on the staff, then they have to pay a penalty to the guild. And it's a policy put in place to encourage the fostering of new writers. And so a lot of times it'll be that freelance will go to like a writer's assistant or a researcher or a showrunner's assistant. And that's kind of your audition piece to see if you're good enough to then get staffed the next season or later that season. So I knew at the end of the previous season, they told me I was going to get the freelance next season. So I knew I'd have to write an episode or get to. And then, they told you like fairly, a few weeks into breaking of the season, they'd come out with the episode order and you'd know, okay, this is when my episode is.
Oh, damn. That would be cool. That's a lot going into that. And then your first episode is Wes's Memorial. What was it like writing such a big scene for the characters on the show and for the fans grieving Wes?
It was a dark show, right? Obviously, you know that. It's a very dark show. It deals with a lot of dark themes. And it was interesting because it was a procedural and then like a soap hybrid. And so some episodes would be more case of the week, and the character stories would be a little bit more in the background. And then some were very character forward. And so I felt fortunate that this was going to be a character forward episode because those are sometimes we had really cool cases of the week and we talked about important issues. And one thing I would like to talk about is sort of the progression of the show from more tabloid sort of cases of the week to like serious commentary on the current state of the criminal justice system in this country, because that stuff became the most important thing that we were talking about in the show to me. But the character forward episode, I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity. And then Pete really had a strong idea for what he wanted that memorial to be early on, where I don't know if you've seen the movie Rachel Getting Married with Anne Hathaway, but it's kind of an indie film where Anne Hathaway's character is named something else, but her sister's getting married. Anne Hathaway's coming back to the family house where the wedding's going to be. And it's clear that there's some backstory about it. Everyone's treating her kind of weird. And you realize that she's got some like drug and alcohol dependency issues. And that's why everyone's kind of nervous around her. Like, is she going to stay sober or not? And spoiler, but she gives this toast for her sister's wedding that's like horrible. And it just everybody feel uncomfortable because she starts saying like these sort of cynical truths about how she feels about everyone. And so Pete knew, I want Laurel to go up there and give this sort of Rachel Getting Married style speech at the memorial. And that, I feel like he wrote that all himself because, we group wrote everything. So when it was your episode, it's more like you're the project manager. You're just in charge of leading the conversation, tracking all of the ideas, pitching everything to Pete. You know, you're in charge of managing that episode and being the most focused on it all the way through. Uh, but there might be episodes like that have my name on them that I ended up not having a lot of scenes I wrote in their version that I wrote them make it to air. But there might be episodes of other writers where like scenes I wrote are in fully intact. So whenever someone, oh, I love that line from your episode, you can't really take credit for them just because of the group writing the way we did it. But that Laurel's and Wes's Memorial, that Pete had a strong vision for that early on, and I feel like that was really his scene. And even like her taking off the shoes, I remember him saying that like he really tapped into the sort of fractured nature that she was going to be in that moment of just like totally untethered from reality, totally lost in her grief, totally not caring what anybody else thought about her, just only caring about Wes.
Damn. And then Annalise not being able to go to the memorial because she's framed and locked up. Damn.
Yeah.
So. And then when did you guys decide that Wes was going to be under the sheet in season 3?
That I couldn't I don't remember offhand when that decision was made.
I feel like that was the only, like, looking back on it, like, people were sad and mad and stuff, but looking back, I feel like that was the only, like, logical person that would make sense for it to be, because it pushed it pushed the season 4, 5, and 6, and I don't think if anyone else would have been under the sheet, it would have pushed more storylines forward. Like, it just made more and
Yeah, it was a big move, and it was something I think we were all nervous about, and there was some back and forth on it. But I think you're right. In the end, it was felt like number one, let's make this world not a world of happy endings. Yeah, not a sort of traditional TV world where the hero always comes out on top, and where dark consequences come from dark actions. And that sort of solidified, you're absolutely right, the tone and the stakes for the series going forward.
damn, Annalise, her scream that she does, and then you guys sprinkled in the adoption stuff later and just made it more heartbreaking. Damn. And then your next episode was in season 4, um the Nobody Roots for Goliath one. What was it like
Favorite title. I think
reading?
that's the title from the series.
And it was a good one. Yeah, I always like would wait in the episode to see who was gonna say the title. And what was it like getting the episode leading up right to the winter finale? For like, what was the like planning all this, like, to make sure all the pieces are in place for the big?
Yeah, so there was often a benefit to having those type of episodes just in terms of how difficult it was going to be to break the episode. You know, when we just call it, I don't know if that term is familiar to everyone. When we say break the episode, we mean just like, I don't know how else would you say it, to be organizing it, um, to get all the story points in order. And it was always easier to break episodes in a way that sort of had to do something that we knew we had to get from point A to point B, or we had to tell this. If it's a flashback episode, we had to tell this part of a story, and we know we'd already told this part and this part. So like, so it gave you some constraint to work with. Um, and still, they could be difficult, and there'd be a lot of debate about how to tell that story or what parts of it to tell. But the constraints were helpful. Some of the hardest ones to break were like sort of an episode like 4 or something in the middle of a season, where like they're beginning the sort of season long arc stories kind of ramping up, but you're not getting to any crescendo or big twist yet. You've got to save those for like your mid-season finale. And so it's really contingent on the case of the week, because those could be so modular. And you could say, okay, let's make it about a corporate person who steals a bunch of money, and you go and break that out for a week, and it's like, this isn't that compelling. What about a mom who takes sleeping pills and kills somebody? Okay, let's break that out. And so you could plug those in and out, and that made it easier to keep changing them. But the ones with constraints, I think, were in some ways easier to break.
Yeah, that would be because mostly all the pieces are in place leading up to the episode before. Yeah. Damn. Do you have a favorite winter finale?
See, you're more so. if we were to go through all of them, I could tell you. I only rewatched the episodes that you said you maybe wanted to talk about on this. There was, like I said, it was so hard to work on that show, and you would go from episode to episode, and there'd be for every version of the show that makes it out in the writers' room. You've kept in your head 3, 4, 10 versions of that episode before it makes it to air, right? So it all starts to it becomes such a challenge to just stay on task. And even like once the script gets out of the room, then there might be some significant change when it's on set or in post production. And so the show is this shifty thing that you're always trying to stay on top of, so that you can keep moving it forward. And it's hard to remember them in the same way I think you have access to them in your memory of like, this was that winter finale. I would know them if I went over them, but I can't think of any specifically off the top of my head. And I think because it was so challenging too, and I was just so exhausted by the end of it last year when we wrapped, there's been some like deliberate just forgetting about it from on my end to like clear my head, because so much of my head was just this show for so long.
Right. Like, season 1 was Sam, 2 was the shooting at Hapsall Manor, 3 was Under the Sheet, 4 was the elevator and Simon at
Oh,
Kaplan and Gold. That's my
wait,
favorite.
the elevator birth?
Yeah,
That's my favorite one.
I don't
That
know.
just thinking about it gives me chills.
Yeah, every time, yeah. And then the baby crying at the end.
Yeah.
Damn. And then season 5 was the wedding with Miller and Nate. And then 6 was Asher and oof.
Yeah, for that definitely. And I forget whose podcast it was. I think Connor was the one who talked about it, or not Connor, Conrad. All
Close.
the time, right? It was that shot. I think it was a guy named Rob Hardy who directed that. And I want to shout out some of the directors I worked with too on these episodes, because they deserve a lot of credit. Like Shireen Allen, who I did my first episode with. I couldn't have asked for a better director to work with on for my first time. She was incredibly gracious and patient with me, and turned in an amazing episode that helped me get staff. So I'll always be grateful to her. But I think it was a guy named Rob Hardy who directed the episode that Conrad was talking about, that finale, mid-season finale. And that shot is, I think, one of the most impressive shots to me, when they go into the elevator with Oliver and then come out off the other floor, because of how they did that. Because it was just that one set, and he went into that. It was just, you go in with him, and then they change the whole lighting and all the cast moves, and they change the furniture around, and he's just in the elevator, and then they come out, and it looks like a whole other floor, but that was the same set. That was really impressive. And it gave that, like, to be with, because it's all about, a lot of times when we were writing scenes or outlines, it's about the emotion, whose emotional POV are we in coming into the scene, and what's their emotion going out of the scene. And I think hitching the emotion of that moment of Simon shooting himself in a way, to Oliver's character, help the audience like feel it in that same way, like you're on that ride with that character. So I think the director deserves a lot of credit for making that moment work.
I went back and watched that scene so quick after that interview was over. That was
Could you tell now, you could see like, oh, now I get how they did it.
yeah, like that would be so cool as an actor, like going in a closed space and then coming out and it's just completely blood everywhere. And
Yeah.
and then your big episode I wanted to talk about, it's in my top 5 episodes of the whole season,
Wow.
or the series. 509, He Betrayed Us Both, with Annalise and Gabriel finally talking and about Sam and all that. What was it like with that episode, with Gabriel's reveal and all that?
I believe that one was directed by John Terlesky, and he is also an amazing director. He's been in the game for a little bit, and just he started out as an actor, but he knows every facet. And so, and I guess I'm kind of starting midway through the process then, but I want to make sure I don't forget to give him a lot of credit for that episode, because it was such an emotionally intensive episode where the actors were required, in another show, you might have an actor play one scene like that throughout the course of a season, right? Where like their emotions are on 10, and it's like the pit of despair moment where everything's gone wrong. But Viola, in that one episode, has so many of those moments, right? And so he was so expert at working with her so that she could have range within that performance, because you don't just want to be one note the whole way through, right? And he would know when to go in and give a note if I was worried, are we getting this? Are we not getting this? And when to push back on me and say, Daniel, it's not going to get any better than that. You want me to make her do that again? Because that would be mean. And like the scene where she's Annalise had the suicide attempt and she's on the floor and Bonnie comes in the bathroom, like that we might have done 2 takes of, maybe just one. And normally you'd want like 4 or 5, you'd want some coverage, but the performance in that is so raw, and such a Viola's a pro and she can get there, and it seems to not affect her when she comes out, but you do start to feel guilty of trying to ask a person to stay in a place like that over and over again, especially when it's like, what else do you want in terms of a performance? Like,
Perfect.
I'm crying at the monitor watching this. I feel like a bad person for making her do this. So a lot of credit to John on that episode, because it was a very raw episode. There's a lot of deep emotion, and I think he knows how to work with actors. And the cast, he'd done other episodes previously, and that's a big thing too when you're trying to do those heavier episodes. If the director has their trust, because he's been there or she's been there before, and they know they can trust this person. And by that point too, I'd learned from being a young writer to a slightly more experienced writer. You can't just hide at Video Village because you're afraid, because you're intimidated. That's the number one thing that's going to make the cast feel like you don't care about them and you're not willing to go out there and to talk with them and try to protect them, because they really do have the most vulnerable job. It's them on screen. They are the person that we're all going to see. Nobody, if I didn't, put my name out there, no one would ever know who I am or what I look like, right? But that's inevitable for their job. And their intensity can, I think, scare a lot of writers, especially first-time writers. And once I realized it wasn't an intensity of pushing away, but like inviting in, and they just wanted me to be part of their conversation and their process, because they're just getting this script and told, like, go do this. They haven't had the time to live with it like we have in the room. That was a wake up for me. So by that point, I feel like I've cultivated enough trust with the cast that they knew I took it seriously and that I'd be there to try to support them as best I could to give the performance that they needed to give. We had a great director there who had earned their trust as well. So I feel like we were able to execute a heavier tone in terms of the script. And then in terms of just breaking the episode, kind of like what I said before, it was one of those with some constraints where we knew what period of time this episode was supposed to be in terms of the flashbacks. And we knew what story we'd already told and what story we were kind of moving towards. So we were able to fairly quickly say, like, these are the moments we can highlight. It's Annalise is coming back from Ohio. She's just lost the baby. Sam is going to reach out to his ex and try to contact his son. That was kind of the news story that we landed on. And then, we wanted to build a bridge to Gabriel in the present, but not have it be too strong. So we came up with that like passing in the hallway moment and the basketball thing, and all that story. All of that episode felt very powerful to me. Even like Bonnie and Frank, like starting their relationship and sort of Frank's backstory, and all that stuff was like there in terms of what we had to tell. And it was just finding the exciting ways to tell it, or the authentic ways to tell it.
And I love, you guys like touched on it in season 2 when Annalise is on hallucinating with the baby and Bonnie's like, there's no baby, Annalise, just like before. And then we finally get to see it in this episode. And then when she's like, when your hand was down my throat, or like she mentioned the overdose, like, so we finally got to see it in season 5. Yeah. And then I love the voiceover with Sam's email to Vivian, and then the ending with one of my favorite characters coming back, with Eve coming. I don't know if you've seen my reaction to that, but it's like an inside joke with me and my friend Corey, how crazy I went for Eve. But yeah, did you guys?
Such a favorite character.
Just her first moment walking in with the red coat on and iconic, like, I don't know. And then when it was revealed that Annalise was into gender girls and didn't have like a preference, and that in season 2. And then just every time she came back, and her and Annalise's relationship, and then Eve found Vanessa, and it was just heartbreaking. And then we got to see Eve at the funeral at the end. So
So
that
you
was,
were rooting for Eve and Annalise to be together in the long run?
well, before Teagan came in to the before
Oh,
Te
okay.
and then yeah, before Teagan, girl. And then um yeah, but just every time Eve came back, their scenes together were so good, and yeah, heartbreaking too, because she left Eve for Sam, and that whole, yeah.
Yeah, one of Pete's big, what's the word I'm looking for? Ethos or philosophies was like, let's not ever try to make everything too clear. Let's make it messy a lot of times to where multiple things could be true, right? Like, did Annalise really run to Sam because she was afraid of being in a relationship with a woman, or was she just generally drawn to Sam? There were a lot of moments where he was always like, just make it messy, make it emotional, and that the messy part of the human experience.
Life, yeah.
Yeah, so that was always fun to work on. And you do know in that episode, young Gabriel is actually Tom Verica's real son.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
that was cool too, to see a dad
He was
to
in Bridgerton too, right? I think.
act with his young son. I don't know if he was in Bridgerton.
I think I saw a post with. I think
Maybe.
maybe like one. I think. But and did you guys know that Eve was gonna come back in that moment with who Frank was been talking to? Was that always Eve, or?
I think we pitched around on that, who that could have been. Um, but Eve was always in the running. I'm trying to remember now who the other people could have been. I remember, you when you're breaking the episodes, you might have like all, this character storyline done, that character storyline done, but you'll come to these moments where it's like, okay, so what's the work for today? Well, we need to figure out who's at the door for Frank. And so you'll spend half a day just talking about, you might come with 20 potential people, some characters you've seen before, some characters, a new character that kind of would fit in with the mythology or the backstory of the show. So I'm sure we did some work like that at some point, but Eve was always in the running and was kind of a front runner to be that person there. And like with the stuff you were mentioning before with the like the stuff about Annalise's suicide and how we sort of mentioned parts of that in the past, we definitely always kept a running list of, here are things we've talked about in the show that we haven't shown fully. When can we go back and sort of answer those questions or fill in those gaps? And do we need to? And what, don't we? And by the end, I feel like we've answered like 65, 70% of those. We've them all on the floor.
And was Eve one of the hands Annalise was holding at the end in that little montage?
That I don't know. In terms of like the actual, was it Famke Johnson actually there, the actress,
Or
or was
was
it
it just,
Eve?
yeah, like, was it
I'll say let's leave that to interpretation.
to,
If that's what
yeah.
if you think so, sure.
I feel like she got one
Yeah,
last little go with Eve toward,
why not?
right? And then one of your, bringing up Teagan, one of your other episodes, I think it's, yeah, 612, with when they're waiting for the verdict for the death penalty, and Annalise and Teagan are on the bench, like, and
Yep.
she's you're the voice for the entire justice system, and it's what's given me real purpose in my life in years. Like, oh my god, girl. Now, what was it like writing your last episode for the series? And um or you're in a group set, like you said, but
Right.
what was it like writing that one last scene, or kind of?
I mean, you could not ask for two better actresses than Viola and Amira to be in a scene together. Amira came on the show. When did Tegan appear? Season 4?
Season 4, yeah.
Season 4. And it wasn't like she was guaranteed to be a series regular at that point, but she was so good, and like so good on camera and just the most amazing person off camera as well, that it was like, well, we got to keep her in, and you want to build storyline around her. And I love the relationship that we built between the two of them. And then that scene, I remember that, like, when you talk about these scenes, I remember like where I was sitting on set, at the monitor, watching them go through it and feeling the same emotions that the characters are feeling in that moment. And that's when I know, like, okay, I have no notes. This is great. What would I change this? Absolutely nothing. Yeah. And they just, we felt, it was great that their relationship had gotten to that place. And it was great to be able to just sit and watch two tremendously talented professional performers just bring that moment to life.
And then the hand holding, and oh my god, and then not the verdict for not the death penalty, and you're just like, okay, that's not how this is going, but the funeral's still coming, and then Alfred coming back as grown up Christopher, was that always set from the beginning, or?
That again, I wouldn't know from the beginning. We might have known from the beginning of season 6, but I'm not exactly sure when that came to be. I know that was all Pete. That was his vision.
Damn. Oh.
And I thought that was so cool.
Damn. Chill. And then
as you heard from Conrad, Alfie is, I know I'm just blowing smoke up everyone here, but Alfie is so, I didn't get to, my first episode was like one of his last, right? He was doing flashbacks at that point.
Frank following it, yeah.
Right. And so I barely got to interact with him on set, but the little I did, he is a very charming person. And then to have him come back, it was really nice. And you could see everybody's face lighting up on set as he would go around and talk. And he talks as passionately. It was very much what's the word I'm looking for? Non-stratified set. He would talk as passionately to anybody who was in the grip department, props, whatever, the other cast members, and I think that's part of the allure of him, is like, he's just super tall, handsome man with a charming, well, he would say in his American accent on set most of the time. And just kind of bouncing around from person to person, having like really intense, thoughtful conversations with them. So that was cool to see.
I hope I can get him on the podcast somehow, someday, maybe. But
I don't know what he's up to now. He's probably doing Shakespeare in London, or I can't because it's shut down.
Oh yeah, true. Damn. And then when we first saw Christoph at the wedding, was at the season 6 winter finale when we met at Paley Center. What was it like seeing fans' reactions live instead of just over social media? Was that like the first event sort of thing you went to, or?
Yeah, that's the only event where I was ever with fans as they were watching something live. It was tremendous. I mean, it was a blessing because, like I said, it's a slog to do this amount of storytelling. You maybe get like a 2-month lead up before you start filming, but then once you're filming, you need to crank out an episode like every 2 weeks. And it's not that formulaic of a show where you can just be like, okay, she's going to have this client, and then by the end she goes to the bar and they play a song and we're done. And so it was really like refreshing and energizing to see how much it meant to everybody there, and to get to hear the reactions live, because there's so much separation from like what you're working on to what the end experience is for everybody. Like for me, the show, to you it might look like sitting in wherever you watched it and like that sort of a thing, or talking with friends. To me, it's like this one room in our studio with these whiteboards and these old couches. Like that's what it feels like to me, because I spent every day in that room for 6 years.
And then that was like the coolest. And then the cast coming out like 10 seconds after the episode, you can't even like process. That was like the coolest night. And then you finding me afterwards was awesome. And damn. So yeah, thank you for.
You got to meet Charlie and Liza, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I saw you peek around the corner when I was taking pictures with them. I saw you peek around. Yeah, they ushered everyone outside, and I was like sitting on the bench because Liza was like like said we were gonna take a picture, so I was like, oh darn it, like, and then like I see Charlie and Liza like walk through the lobby, and they're like looking. It's like all glass, so you can like see. And I see Charlie point out the window because he sees me, and he's like talking with the usher, like not arguing, but he's like really stern. And
Oh,
then this lady comes out, and like there's like a whole bunch of fans out there still, and she's like, Niles, come with me. And I'm like freaking out. Like everyone looks at me, and I drop my backpack, and yeah, then I go in and meet them, and oh my god, one of the emotional. Ugh. Oh
I'm
man.
glad I got to be there. I'm glad all the fans were there to give us an emotional moment. I'm glad we got to be there to give you one as well.
And oh my god. I do have a, I was like trying to. I feel like there's like a whole bunch of little breadcrumbs that Tegan's past was left,
Mhm.
and I've been like trying to compile all of them because I really want to like try to write a spin-off for Tegan, and I was
Mhm.
wondering if you had any advice for new writers and stuff. I have like a cork
For
board, like
for new okay for advice for a new writer would be definitely follow your passion. And that's one of the reasons I was so interested in what connected you to this show as a fan, because I think it's great to care about something this deeply, to have it mean that much to you. And I think it's great that you're doing this podcast. And to me, it's going to be like, I'm so excited to see who else you get to interview, because it's like this beautiful yearbook almost of this
uh,
thing that was so important to me in my life. So it's nice to flip the roles now, and I get to be your fan as you embark on this project. But first off, this your show is definitely going to be contingent on Amira Vaughn's availability, which is going to be slim, because she's going to be people are going to want to work with her, and she's going to be booked up. I think she's probably booked up already for like the next 2 years. Um, and then also the rights to the show, which ABC owns. You know, if you want it to just be like a fun sample that could get you in a writer's room, then that's cool. But if you're making it like really because you want to make this show, you're giving yourself a lot of encumbrances that will make it more challenging than if you were to just write an original idea. Um,
yeah, I'm just I think more as like you said, like the sample, like to test out my like to get my skill, or yeah, like just to try my
well,
hand in it.
then I would say, writing is rewriting. So don't be afraid. One of the mistakes I made most often early on is when people would give me notes, I would be like, oh, they hate me, they don't get my brilliance or whatever it is, and just kind of shut down or ignore them. And even if it's you think not the best note, it's really behooves you to try to get to the bottom of it. Like, what's really their issue here? They might have said they didn't like when this character said this line in scene number 20, but really what it's about is they don't understand what this character's goal is back in scene number 2. I didn't set that up clearly enough. The main mistakes I see newer writers making: number one, every scene you want to come in with your character's emotional state at the top of the scene. What's their goal in the scene? In every scene there's a goal that the character has. There's something in their way which leads to conflict, and then there's some resolution of the conflict which advances the plot. So make sure that it's character with a specific goal, some other, usually it's a person who's in their way, right? Or if it's a Teagan spinoff, I'm sure is there a legal component to it? Is she going to be working at her own
I
law firm?
I was gonna have it set in like the Mexico City Kaplan and Gold before
Oh,
she,
it's a prequel.
before, yeah.
Oh, okay, very
And
cool.
then I wanted to connect it with Laurel getting kidnapped because Laurel said that Teagan represented her father when Laurel got. And I wanted to connect Jorge, and then the plane crash that killed Teagan's family. I wanted Jorge to be involved in that to make him like an even bigger monster than we already know. He become like he is with Wes, and then
Bigger. He was pretty big already.
yeah, but a plane taking down a plane is pretty big.
So I would say in this case, make sure that what you're writing can stand on its own merits, right? It can't just be, especially if you want it to be a sample for yourself. don't just make it fan service to people like you or myself who's like intimately aware of How to Get Away with Murder. It
Yeah.
needs to be interesting in and of itself, as though How to Get Away with Murder never existed. It's got to be its own thing. So it can't all be like callbacks and tie-in.
Yeah.
And really the way you do that is give your character, whoever, like, so clearly Teagan's your main character. Why is the audience going to be sympathetic to her? Like in the Pilot with Murder, right? We've all been that person like Wes coming into this new world feeling sort of outclassed, outgunned. Everybody else is way ahead of us and we're just trying to catch up, but we know we maybe have what it takes. So what is it that's attaching us to Teagan sympathetically? What's her goal overall in the episode? And then in every scene, goal, obstacle, conflict. A lot of young writers forget that, and they'll have scenes where there's either no conflict, or I might walk in and say like, Niles, I'm never going to give you the passcode to the bomb. And you'll be like, I already know the passcode to the bomb. And I'm like, okay, bye. And so the conflict doesn't escalate at all. The protagonist doesn't have to actually do anything or make any choice to get the thing that they need. They just have it sometimes, or they just figure it out. So you want to be wary of that. And then also read as many screenplays as you can. There's a ton of them online for free. And read them, and even the ones that you like, that you maybe think could be a reference for your project, take some scenes and rewrite them by hand, like with a pen or pencil. Just rewrite them word for word, and it'll help you get into the flow and the internalizing that thought process of those other screenplays and those other writers. That can be a helpful tool as well.
Yeah, I went over like the pilot for Murder, and or not rewrote it like that, but all the changes, like it's not like it's supposed to be like a final, your first one's not supposed to be your final one, like you're gonna rewrite it. So yeah, it's a
For a
prequel,
first time
but
writer,
yeah.
you might go through 5 to 10 major rewrites before you feel like you have it done. So don't be afraid to rewrite, and don't ever feel like it's a failure. It's really, to come back to it, like you have to have, especially when nobody's paying you to do it, you have to have that passion, right? So if you're excited about it, if it's bringing you joy to do it, you're going to keep doing it. You're going to keep putting in the effort to make it what it needs to be. But it can take a long time, especially the first time is the longest time. And
Thank you
those
for
there's books too. There's good books about screenwriting as well. There's so many of them.
I do have one. It's oh, my headphones won't reach. I do have this one.
Which one is that? Can't see the Tools of Screenwriters Guys, Chris. I haven't even read that one. I'm sure it's good. They're all useful. Like they all have good stuff in them.
I haven't started. That's the first step too. Start that. Oh man. Oh man. I kind of wanted to end this off with asking what your proudest moment on the show has been.
Oh, easy. The crossover episode where Annalise goes to the Supreme Court.
Oof.
And not because it was the crossover, even though that was really cool to do, but because that was a turning point that season where, as Annalise started taking on the role of sort of a public defender, of not just trying to get her clients off week to week, but of putting the whole system on trial. Because that was, like, I came into this show, I think, fairly unbiased in terms of my opinion of the criminal justice system. And then the more research I did, I talked with tons of lawyers, the incarcerated, victims of crimes, bail bondsmen, judges, and you start to get a picture of a system that really is self-perpetuating in terms of taking advantage of incarcerating poor people, specifically Black and brown people, destroying families, perpetuating cycles of trauma, perpetuating cycles of violence, disenfranchising communities. That stuff became so important to talk about in the show, and being able to put that in Annalise's mouth and bring that to millions of people week to week, that felt like a tremendous privilege and a tremendous responsibility, and made us always double down on our research and making sure factually, are we telling this story correctly? Because even though this is a show that's doing a lot of things in terms of character storytelling, we're sending a bigger story just about the state of this system in general, which, in my opinion, has noble ideals that it does not live up to. And the cool thing about the law is that every day these battles are being fought all over the country, that could change the way we live in our society. And ultimately, it does always make its way to the Supreme Court, and that's who decides, what's the precedent, which way we're going to rule. And there's so much opportunity for change within that. And even if you look across, like it's a show that takes place in Philadelphia. So we were always researching Pennsylvania law. But a lot of the resources I have access to were in Los Angeles. So I sort of concurrently was getting a crash course in Los Angeles law as well, which is very different. One of the things, for instance, is in Pennsylvania, they flipped over. I'm sorry to go long on this answer.
No.
In Pennsylvania, I think it was 5 years ago or so, they transitioned their entire juvenile system from a traditional criminal justice system to what's called restorative justice. And we talk about that some in the show. It's an entirely different philosophical approach to crime, where as opposed to punishing the perpetrator of a crime, you want to look at crime as a wound in the society. And you're asking, how can I heal this wound? What can we do to make this society whole again? And that might mean incarceration for somebody, but it also will probably mean counseling services for the victims of the crime, which our current system does not offer at all, right? The only consolation we give to someone who's been robbed, who's been attacked in any way is like, we'll put the person who did it behind bars, and that's supposed to give that person peace of mind. Well, that doesn't give a person peace of mind most of the time. Like a lot of time in restorative justice, for instance, it'll be about having the perpetrator sit down with the person. It might be, there was a story I remember we researched where it was somebody was a manager of a Burger King and they got robbed at knife point. The whole exchange took like 30 seconds. They gave them the money from the register. Nobody got physically hurt and the person left. Well, that manager was so traumatized just by being violated in that way that they started drinking heavily. Their marriage fell apart. They lost their job. It had severe long-term consequences for their life. But nobody, at no point systemically would anybody step in and say, hey, let's get this person some trauma counseling because they just went through a trauma, right? It's like, oh, they weren't even cut. It's fine. We'll find the person who had the knife, lock them up. That solves the problem. And it doesn't. And especially with youth offenders, there's a lot of changes now in California, for instance. It was legal to send people, I think as young as like 14, to jail for life without the possibility of parole for crimes they committed as teenagers until recently. Now that's changed, but there's still people who are in jail who were sentenced that young, but they have to go through an appeal process now to try to get out. But that's insane because we know for a fact that the teenage brain is just drastically different from the adult brain. They don't understand the consequences of their own action, and they're more prone to risky behavior. Like there's basically a crime curve. I'm going to go too deep into all this stuff. There's basically a crime curve, right, where the majority of crime committed in this country is committed by men between the ages of like 16 and 26 or something like that, like the vast majority. Because these are people who their brains aren't fully formed yet, they don't understand the consequences, and they're more prone to risky behaviors. But once they get beyond that, their potential for like rehabilitation shoots way up. So if you take someone who was in this risky zone who committed a crime and then you lock them up for life without potential of parole, right? You're not giving this person a chance when they fully have even become a person. They could have become a productive member of society, but we're not giving them that opportunity. And so now you have like a child who's going to grow up without a father. That's another thing, is when you take someone and incarcerate them, whether you believe that's right or wrong, let's say they had a family. Now you've effectively, it's just a loss for that child. They've now lost their father figure or their mother figure. When we had in the episode season, I forget which one, 5, when Viola's in jail, and we had her in jail with those other women, like that, unfortunately, has increasingly become the reality in this country. It's been something like a 70% increase in women being incarcerated over the last 10, 20 years in this country. And a big part of that reason is because this incarceration system that we built is so big and so hungry for bodies that it starts to fill up those cells that we're building. Anyway, I'm going to go off the deep end here. But the thing I'm most proud of is getting in the messaging about the state of our criminal justice system. In that crossover episode, we were talking specifically about public defenders, and that in and of itself is, it's supposed to be this equal dichotomy between the prosecutor and the defense attorney, and that you as the accused have just as good of a chance because of your advocate as the prosecutor has of proving your guilt. Well, that's just not the case in pretty much any county across the country, because the prosecution is so much more heavily funded than the public defenders. The people who end up in jail, who get arrested, predominantly people who can't afford to hire their own attorney, so they have to rely on a public defender. And public defenders might have 100 cases on their docket at one time. They might only be able to meet with their client 5 minutes before they get before the judge and say, like, was this true? Was this true? Was this true? Okay, the best you can do is I can try to plea you out. And that's why everything is in a plea deal, right? The system is set up to make sure that everybody pleas out, because trials take a long time and they're costly. So the prosecution has all these weapons to force a person to plea. And they might say, well, a guilty person, I mean, innocent person would never admit to something they didn't do. Well, we know that that's factually wrong as well. It's very easy, in fact, to get false confessions from people or to pressure people so much that they feel like they have no option. So there's a lot wrong with how we do criminal justice. And in fact, given the current state of our country, it's one of the few things that both Republicans and Democrats agree upon, that we do need criminal justice reform, because the money that we're spending on incarceration is just insane in this country. I think, I don't know the numbers, but I know we incarcerate a higher percentage of our population than any other country in the world. So that stuff became a real passion for me, and I'm glad we got to get it in that storyline.
And another powerful moment for the show was the moment of silence before the Supreme Court, when Annalise and Gabriel taped that box on the floor, and this is what he had for all these years, and this is all he heard, and then actually doing it for like a minute or so, like on air.
So one other quick anecdote, I'll try not to link it to 5 others. The term penitentiary comes from, I think the first penitentiary was built in Pennsylvania. We think, oh, these things have been around for all of time, and that's not true. Our version of incarceration is a fairly modern one in this country. And a penitentiary, I forget who, it was some religious order designed them, and they said that their belief was that all evil behavior was because a man had lost touch with God, and because he was like basically being influenced by demons and devils. And so you would put them alone in a box where all they could do was meditate and converse and pray with God and be penitent. And then they would come out reformed. They would realign with their godly nature and leave the demons behind, right? So this is all nuts. There's no basis. And everything that was in that episode is heavily researched and heavily true. Solitary confinement is 100%, in my opinion, cruel and unusual punishment. It's torture for an individual. Then you think, oh, I'm not actively beating them, or I'm not, electrocuting them or waterboarding them. It doesn't matter. We're social creatures. We're creatures that need stimulation. We need interaction. Putting someone in a box where they keep the lights on, 24 hours a day, or even if they don't do that, it creates psychosis. It breaks people down. It's cruel. It's unnecessary. It doesn't do any good, right? And so I'm glad we were able to at least get that messaging out there. But yeah, that was a powerful moment. Sorry.
Thank you for all that.
I'm going off on a tangent here.
That was good. Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, I took up most of your, probably longer than an hour. I'm sorry. But yeah, thank you for coming on and agreeing to be on episode 3 of my podcast.
I'm honored to be here. I'm honored that you were such a devoted fan of ours. I'm so glad that you enjoyed the show. I'm glad that you're taking that energy and putting it to work for yourself and for your own goals. Because my one offering to you is, I hope that as much as you love this show and are excited about it, you have that level of energy for yourself and for your things you're working on as well, because you should.
Right. Yes. I'm trying to, exercising, and hopefully I can start this draft, and yeah.
Don't be afraid. When you're writing, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of failure, because the secret is you will fail. You'll fail a million times. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it's a process. So just keep going with it.